process. Hi, this is Jan Kastner with Housenewz, and once again on this episode I'm with Nate McWilliams from Fairway Independent Mortgage, a good lender here in the greater Harrisburg area. I've worked with them a lot, and today we're talking about the pre-approval process and sort of, Nate, some red flags that might pop up when you're interviewing somebody to see how much home or to get them started buying a home. What are some of the things that you kind of maybe shake your head at and go, uh-oh, what would you see like that?
Yeah, sure. That's great stuff. As we talked about before, pre-approval is really the first step in the process. And what a buyer is going to experience is a lot of questions. The lender's going to have a lot of questions for the buyer, not just for what we have to actually put into our file system for the application, but for questions that we are sort of probing, looking for what I call potholes in the pathway down the road or obstacles that might come up in the road that I want to be thinking as a lender, I want to be thinking about now so that we're not slowing the process up once you have a home under contract. We can be perhaps working on some of those red flags or those issues in advance. And that's really where our line of questioning comes from. So some of the things that we're talking about and asking about, say for example when we're talking about income, we're going to want to know how long maybe you've been at your employer, if you've changed jobs a lot, if you've had any job gaps. These are things we may have to explain to an underwriter.
How about job changes? So I'm a mechanic this year, but next year I'm working in sales at a retail store. Does that change in profession affect anything?
Absolutely, and that's a great example there because you're taking a profession that maybe is hourly or salaried perhaps as a mechanic, and now you may be moving somebody into a sales position that may be perhaps a base salary plus commission or 100% commission. That is going to have a big impact on the documentation that I'm going to need, what we might need to explain to an underwriter, and so that's one of the flags that we would be looking for in our line of question when we talk about your employment, your past employment, and your future employment moving forward, because it may take a little while, perhaps a few weeks to find a home, and if you're going to be changing jobs in between or during that process, a lender's definitely going to need to know that because it's going to impact the documentation that we're going to
Now it doesn't apply if I'm the mechanic in a car dealership and I got promoted to the guy in charge of all the mechanics. I'm still in the same industry and I'm with the same company. That doesn't really raise a flag.
No, not really. Certainly if you're staying within the same industry, it makes things much smoother. And when we really talk about flags, it's really flags for the lender, as in our mind, we're beginning to think about what we're going to need to present to the underwriter, because it's really the loan officer's job as sort of the quarterback of the process to put together a file that is very clear and concise as to why we should lend the buyer money to the underwriter. So we are thinking ahead about things that could create issues or generate questions from the underwriter. If I have a question or I'm confused about something, the underwriter is definitely going to be confused because you never actually talk to the underwriter. I can have that conversation and go deeper and figure out what really the issue is and then what we need to present and how we need to present it to the underwriter. Other red flags that are going to come up, things perhaps on the credit report, maybe you've got some collections or some late payments on there. We may need to address those in some way.
They're not insurmountable though, you just have to
Absolutely.
get a reason what they're there for.
Yeah, don't think of these red flags as something that's going to kill the deal or not be able to get a mortgage. But they're things that we want to address at the beginning so that the mortgage process is less stressful, smoother for both the realtors and the buyers as well as the sellers. So we're not finding out about perhaps a job change
Last minute.
Or some mysterious new bank account that shows up the week before closing. We want to know all of that stuff in the beginning so that we can address it and have it taken care of in a smooth, less stressful manner.
Well, speaking of bank accounts then, at least I advise my clients, don't move money around. If you're going to get a gift from somebody as part of the down payment, let's talk about that before you start, here's $10,000 from mom and dad. Well, where did that money come from?
Yeah, 100%.
So don't do anything until you talk with Nate and he'll tell you how to do it. So what would that be like?
That's to tell you how to do it is really sort of a great way to put it here, because when we deal with things like gift money or multiple bank accounts or maybe cryptocurrency or something like that people are using these days, how we move that money and deal with that money is very important, because there's an easy way and kind of a hard way. And a lot of times people will go ahead and just start perhaps moving money from a savings to a checking and things like that in advance, thinking that's the best thing to do. And it may not always be the best thing to do. You're going to want to work with your lender, talk through the options or the scenarios and how you can handle that money to help perhaps reduce some documentation, reduce some confusion on the underwriter's side. You don't want to do things like go out and get a new credit card, or try to go out and get an auto loan because a great deal on a car showed up. You don't want to be moving money around. If you've got money in crypto, we just don't want you automatically dumping it into checking, for example, because there's going to be documentation needs around that, and depending on how that money is moved around will determine the type of documentation that we really need. So you can save yourself a lot of stress by just keeping your financial situation very stable, very normal throughout the process, and then speaking and working with your lender if you are going to make any changes, or if there are some changes coming up.
So let Nate tell you what you should do to get pre-approved before you go moving things around yourself and saying, well, now I'm ready.
Absolutely.
I tell my clients when they come to you anyhow, just be honest with them, tell him what you got, and he'll tell you what he can work with and what you should be doing next. It makes the process so much easier.
Absolutely. We don't want anybody shooting themselves in the foot before the process would even get started.